Thank you, sir. Hello, guys. It's the first day, end of the day. I guess everybody's very excited to have some very deep conversation about how smart contracts work and everything. But that's not that type of a speech. So what I wanted to talk about is how many of you guys get your salaries on chain? How many of you guys are paid on chain? Okay. And how many guys of you off-ramp sometimes? Yeah, no wonder, it's the same amount of people, obviously. But here's the thing. I have a thesis that DeFi is still a sandbox. In the past couple of years, we as an industry and we as a community, we were able to recreate and rebuild all of the major traditional finance primitives from the ground up. We started creating new primitives that have not existed before. And well, we were all expecting for this, aha moment where, all right, so where's that next billion of people coming up? Where are all these people? Who are all these normies, and how do we turn everyone into normies, that you just use the tech and it just works? And I would correct my thesis. DeFi is mostly a sandbox, and here's the reason. Have you ever considered or thinking about, well, why on and off ramps are like garbage? It's just complicated. It's very dumb. You can go on chain. You can take a loan in 15 seconds. You can collateralize your assets. You can have yield and yielding assets that you can also use as collaterals. You can stream your money in the real time. You can, basically assign value to your valueless JPEGs and get something out of it. But when it comes to paying for things in the real world, all of a sudden, all of that utility that we have created, it somehow doesn't make sense. All your valueless and invaluable JPEGs out there, somehow your landlord doesn't accept them. So what you do is, well, you have to off-ramp. And well, let's take a look into how on-ramping and off-ramping works right now. So what do? First, you have to be banked, right? You have to have a bank account. You have to have a card. Card in Europe, in Northern America, that's the most popular means of using your money as the last mile connectivity. So you can have your money in your bank account, but if you want to spend it, if you want to buy that coffee, what happens is you actually tap your card, right? So cards is the most popular means of using your money. Now, when you want to off-ramp or on-ramp in this case, what do? So you have your bank account. The next thing you do is, well, you have to open an account and exchange. What do? Well, you have to wire your crypto, and I specifically use this term as wire because it's exactly the same thing as you're wiring money to your landlord via SEPA, via SWIFT. What happens then? Well, what you have to do is, well, that depends on an exchange, what kind of tokens they support, what networks they support. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that the token that you are wiring to an exchange is supported there, and they have the liquidity, and they have the pool, and they can actually exchange it and swap it to something that you can exit from. If you are on-ramping in this case, well, what you have to do is, well, you have to not forget about the gas on the native token. So if you want to withdraw your money to your EOA wallet, you have to have that gas, because otherwise, if you have some USDCs in your empty wallet, the transaction is somehow, it's not going to go through. And calling Vitalik just not going to help it. Then what you need to do, right, is you need to send that gas as well as all of the tokens to your, EOA wallet, the wallet that you custody, so self-custody wallets from that exchange wallet. And I hope you guys, do you even care about the custody, non-custody? How many of you guys care about that? Okay, majority of the people. So there's a big difference, right, between who owns the keys, how the keys owned, how the keys generated, how they're stored. But let's say you somehow want to participate in our little sandbox in DeFi. So you send that money, you send the tokens, you send the gas token for that network where you want to execute your transactions on. You send them to the wallet. Then what do? Well, then you have some magic dApp that does some magic things, because, well, you still need the interface. How many of you guys on a daily basis are just like, somehow interact directly with contracts, whether, say, Etherscan or actually directly on chain? How many of you guys? One person. That's 2, 3. Okay, 4, that looks like a bit of bidding. But not many people, right? So we, normal people, well, we use interfaces. And we ask developers to build those interfaces so that we can conveniently use whatever the magic thing that I've built. So then you need to somehow connect your wallet to that dApp so that the dApp can prepare and bundle that transaction and send it, basically for your wallet to execute and for you to sign it. And all of that is just complicated. It's just annoying. We get used to it. If you guys have been in the space for a little while, you get used to this shitty experience. And it's shitty for off-ramping as well. It's exactly the same thing, but in the reverse order. You have to connect your wallet, you go to this dApp, you click withdraw, you get your money in your wallet, and then you send it to an exchange, and then you do something, and then somehow then you can actually spend it in the real world. The whole point of all of me ranting about all of this is, what if we cut all of that process? What if we just say, why cannot I connect my wallet to transact both on-chain and to transact off-chain? And that's the whole point, and that's the whole thing that I'm trying to say, is that what I believe, until we are able to do that, our DeFi little sandbox is still and will still remain as the sandbox. And in order to cut it, and in order for people to transact easily and to have all of these amazing opportunities, imagine getting, okay, I did something wrong. Imagine getting your salary paid to your account in the real time, where you sit in the, you sit somewhere at home, or you sit in the coffee shop, or somewhere in the, in the workspace. So you work there for 2 hours, you had some business calls there, and then all of a sudden, you have some fiat that you can spend. Now, how many of you guys have been in the industry since maybe 2016, 17? Same people, right? Do you remember this narrative? Is that we are going to make crypto globally available. So all of the merchants are going to accept my crypto, and we're just going to tap our wallets, and everything's going to go smoothly. Now, how many of you guys have actually, even seldomly used that option? So how many merchants do actually accept your Bitcoins or your ETH or even some other magic internet money? How many of you guys actually paid in crypto, or how often do you do that? One person, right? Couple of people. How many merchants actually have that capacity? And what do you think happens there, right? So when you execute the transaction, when you scan that QR code, you're sending your money to that merchant. The merchant doesn't care about crypto. The merchant doesn't get crypto. There's a company sitting there that settles that crypto for fiat for the merchant, so that the merchant gets money, fiat, into their bank account. And that's how they reconcile. Why? Because until every single step in that supply chain of that, let's say, coffee shop, until that very moment, they all reconcile in crypto, the merchant will always want fiat. So what if we don't take the approach where we try to bring crypto to the world? What if we say that we just create the bridge from crypto to the real world, where I can easily access all of the utility and tools that DeFi is giving me and connect it to the traditional finance? And that's exactly the conversation about that. What if we cut all of that and we just say that I connect my wallet, I execute my transactions on both on-chain, dApps, I do whatever the stupid shit I do every day, but I also can pay for things offline. And what kind of opportunities, right, does it give us? That's the shill time for just a few of the amazing protocols. What if we say that we can have the self-repaying loans? So what if I have my assets, I want to keep an exposure in that asset? Is it possible for me to use that as a collateral, take the loan, spend the loan in the real world, and then still have the full control of the position? So if I want to repay, I can. Or in this case, for example, as Alchemix has introduced back in the days, it will eventually repay itself. What if your money earns you yield, and that pays for your everyday expenses? That Spotify subscription, Netflix subscription, Google subscription. I mean, you as a company, you can have, Google bills, AML, any type of bills. What if that's covered by your on-chain yield? Can you connect that logic? What if, what if you don't want to pay interest on that loan? You can have something like zero interest loans. You want exposure in that ETH. So what do you do? Well, you basically mint LUSD. And that's just a few examples of what could happen, because you can create infinitely more of those primitives all combined together, because what you do is that you're not focusing on merging the two infrastructures, which will never be able, what I believe, to merge or integrate natively, but what you do is you create those bridges. And it opens up this opportunity of pretty much anything that you have ever tried on chain or anything that touches money. Because, well, let's put it this way. Correct me if I'm wrong, and put the hand up if you believe that's true, and just don't put it up if you think that's not true. The majority of protocols in crypto, if you strap aside that middle thing with the magic that they do, it's all down to two things: deposit and withdraw. So anything like even swapping, right? You're depositing one token, withdrawing another token. You collateralize one thing, you receive another thing. You buy one thing, you sell another thing. So basically, all coming down to these two things, like deposit and withdraw. And all of that revolves around the money. And then everything else, it serves that infrastructure so that you are able to do that. So in this question, or in this case, the idea is that we tap into that moment of you depositing or into you withdrawing. So after all of this, I guess the main question and the big question is, well, how does that work, right? Is it even possible? Can you do that? What about oracles? What about bridges? What about connecting off-chain systems to on-chain systems? How is it even possible? How secure is that? How decentralized is that? There's a lot of important questions. I'll get in a moment into this, but ultimately, I think we have to realize that the ultimate vision of everything to be decentralized and money that has to be decentralized and that your bank has to be decentralized and that your card has to be decentralized and that anything that touches you has to be decentralized. We're not there yet, right? And with every day that we're going forward, regulations, governments, institutions, so everybody who is in favor of having the status quo, they're making you harder to achieve that goal. Can you really claim that some protocol is truly decentralized? What is that level of decentralization? I guess we can use the very, very recent example is, let's say, well, multi-chain. How many of you guys have ever used multi-chain bridge? A lot of people, right? So then, okay, you see this tweet that's coming up and says, well, we can't reach our CEO that has keys to some server, so sorry, your money is lost. Is that decentralized, or is that immutable? Is that how do you say, right? So it's an edge, right? It's like a gray area between, well, truly centralized and truly decentralized. So it's always somewhere in that spectrum. And what we suggest and what we say is that, well, you have to decentralize what you can, and then you don't try to decentralize or recreate the will of something that is already regulated and something that cannot be changed or questioned. And that's our idea. Our idea is that we combine two things together. So we combine Web3, and we leave those primitives to us as the community. I think that we as the community have one of the smartest and brightest minds in the industry that are working in their basements, in their moms preparing their meals, but recreating. You all remember this meme, right? Are you winning, son? And I think we are. And we are those people in front of the computers actually changing the world. But then there's the other side, which is the off-chain part, which is very regulated. You have specific rules, and this meme, right? The dev is dead. It's bullish. Well, it's not really the case, right, in the off-chain world. But what we are saying is that we have an opportunity, we have an option to combine those two things, and here's how. Yeah, that's it. I'm joking. What we can do is we can say is this. There's infinite amount of layers and blockchains and networks now. How many, but before we jump into that, how many networks do you guys use on a daily basis? Like how many you can name, but how many you actually use? I'd say it's probably like one of the two. Like is anyone here, yeah, you're different, sir. How many of you guys have used, I don't know, more than 3 chains in the past 2 weeks? Okay, that's a lot, right? That's good, okay. My question here is then, how many of you guys use those chains to do what? Was it that to make more money? Is it, okay. Was that to do something that would help you, besides from the money aspect, like in the real world? I don't know, something to control your data, something to control your information, something to help you do something else. Probably not. So what approach that we have tried and the approach that we are following is this. We're saying that we can deploy our infrastructure in every network that, that we can support, and we'll dive that into a bit deeper. We have a dApp, and the dApp works exactly like every other Web3 dApp. You have the Web3 connector, the dApp creates and bundles and basically prepares the transaction for your wallet to sign, so you can sign the wallet. But what it also does is that it creates the direct bridge to the off-chain world, and that's your acquirer bank, that's your payment systems, and that's basically everything else that's required for you to legally interact within that space. That's, as I mentioned, multiple times now throughout the speech. It's very regulated and it's very clear what kind of rules are there. But with this kind of approach, what happens is that you can create the on-chain infrastructure that is modular enough for you to abstract all of those primitives, all of those complicated things, like lending, like yields, like money streaming, all of that, and formulate and granulate it into one specific thing. How much money, and at what case and when, do you want to send to the specific user? And I specifically use the word send because in other case, again, everything that happens with money eventually is just transferring money from one place to another place. So what we've built is we've built the set of tools and the set of things that allow us to work with you guys who are building all of these things that change the world to allow us eventually all together, so people who use Web3 in one capacity or another capacity, is to use our money in a more efficient way. And what I mean by that is very specifically, so I'm bullish on ETH. So what happens is that I want to make sure that I can maximize my efficiency. So I tell my company, well, I want to get paid in ETH. The company says, well, we have to then have what? ETH on the balance sheet? How do we do that? So what if the company can pay me in euro? And then that euro is automatically converted into ETH. And that ETH is then immediately deployed, or it's using as the collateral on Liquidity, and it's minting LUSD. Well, okay, how do I use LUSD? As we already said, I cannot send LUSD to my, to my bank account. So what if that LUSD goes and does the trip around and goes back to euro? But in that case, it allows me to control that position and to control the way that my money works out for me. And actually, because it's already getting closer to the end of the day, what I wanted to say and what I wanted to add, just this one little thing out there, is there's one guy, one very smart one that wasn't me, who said that you need to build future-proof things. And in that case, the whole reason why I'm relaying and telling you all of this is that what we still have now as an industry in DeFi is still a sandbox, and it's critical, we need to make sure that we create ways for that complexity to be abstracted and presented in a very simple way to the masses so that people can use it without having to understand, how do I even connect to this network to use that protocol that will allow me to do something? We have to have things like this that will allow you to use your money, yes, in a non-custodial way, but two, in a compliant way that already works for the real world. So we're not trying to waste our time to recreate the infrastructure that's already there, but we emphasize our time on building something that, it's just not integrated yet, it just doesn't exist yet. So if you are building something on chain, if you believe that what you're building will allow people to use their money more efficiently or to access their money more efficiently, feel free to chat. Thank you. I guess, if you guys have any questions, sure. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the talk. Yeah, I support your idea and your efforts, but for instance, I worked for some time as an auditor of some Ethereum smart contracts. And actually, there were exactly two companies who tried to breach CeFi and DeFi, like real finance. And what they did actually, that they left a lot of room for possible like contract upgrades, like how to seize tokens, etc., etc. So because they know that they are like real world companies, like off-chain companies, they have regulations, and like at any time these regulations come and say, okay, so these like persons from Florida can't own this like assets, and they just have to do like and leave these backdoors in their contracts to allow them like to satisfy these requirements. So is there any I don't know idea how to uh, like
Mitigate
I
it,
don't know mitigate this so to allow this developers, because of course so tech chain allows to do that, but how like allow user like
Absolutely.
real developers to do that?
That's a very good question. And that's probably the problem of, as you mentioned, traditional or centralized services. Why? Because if you have an exposure or if you have an ability to do something, there can be the regulator that comes back to you and tells you, well, you need to do this, right? And that's why banks are obligated, if the regulator comes and tell, well, we want you to freeze assets of this guy, they must do that. And in this case, the only way to get out of this for you is that I would say the critical or the most sensitive part, right? On-ramping and off-ramping are the most vulnerable pieces of this entire infrastructure. Why? Because they're very easy to control. So if you can create new rules for on-ramps and off-ramps, to do something, that basically affects the entire flow, right? Money in, money out. What we are doing and what we engage in approach, we are going a step forward, saying that we want to ensure that we cannot have access to your money. That's one part. So, for example, how can you freeze assets that you do not own? That comes to the question of regulatory perspective is, well, you have your obligations from security, AML, risk perspective, but what you can do is you can tell the customer, we cannot serve you in the moment, and there are maybe multiple reasons for that, and you may freeze their fiat assets, but if you have no way, no control to their non-custodial wallet, you cannot freeze assets that are there. So if we just change the perspective of and I think a lot of you guys in crypto are doing this way. You have your money in crypto. When you need to spend it, you off-ramp it. You spend that, and then you do it again. So it's like a reload cycle. So you're not saying that, OK, I'm going to off-ramp $100,000, and then I'm just going to spend it over 12 months. You off-ramp what you need in that time, and then you do it again. So the model here, and that's how it works from the regular perspective, is that what we're saying is when you want to off-ramp, you're bound to these real-world rules, terms and conditions, what you can do. But then if we cannot serve you, we should just not serve you, so we cannot take your money. So if, for any reason, you cannot be served, then what happens is that the money is not just accepted. So for example, there's no way for an exchange to turn off that deposit address. They give you the deposit address, you send the money there, and then they tell you if it's okay or not, right? Then they can tell you if they can serve you or not. But what happens if you shift that moment of we can serve you or we cannot to the on-chain part and tell you that in that moment where you execute the transaction, okay, can you be served or not? Because if you can't, the transaction will revert. So yes, you can be the best guy in the world or you can be the worst guy in the world, but that's your money. That's not our job to police that. Our job is to police only what's required by rules, because again, as we said, the meme, right? Dev's dead, bullish, right? That's not the case. So what I'm saying here is that if we just shift the moment of where and what you custody and what you have the exposure to, saying that we can only serve this specific case, or we're allowed to serve it, and then if we're not, we cannot take the money from you, and there's no way. What if, I'll give you one example, allowance. How many of you guys care about allowance? So when the dApp tells you, screw that, whatever, just give me infinite allowance. How many of you guys actually check and see for that and try to correct it? Okay, what happens if on a smart contract level, the contract itself tells you, no, you cannot give me more allowance that you want to off-ramp? Because if you give me more, I'll revert. Because at the end of the transaction, at the end of the cycle, I want you to have zero exposure to my contracts. And what happens that if you do all the things that you're required by law at the moment of that transaction interaction? So when you try to off-ramp, the transaction fails for numerous reasons. But then the money can never be seized because if the transaction fails, the money comes back to you. So the worst case in this case, what can happen to you, you can be unserved by one service, but what happens if there's many more like this? Then you have optionality. But what happens is you don't get into the situation like you do now is, well, I mean, how many of you guys seen this on Twitter? Like, I send money to this exchange, it doesn't let me to withdraw. And there could be, again, it's very hard to speculate what happens in those specific cases. It could be the good guy, it could be the bad guy. How do we know? What we can see is that someone's having those withdrawal issues. What if you never withdraw your deposit? What if you actually spend what you need to spend and you're just shifting that small narrative? So hopefully that helps. Basically, the idea is from the moment you take custody of things or the moment you interact with a service and bound to the terms and conditions, you shift the narrative from what is seizable, what is controllable, to what is not.
Hi, Anton. Thanks for the lovely presentation. I have more question around the aesthetics. So from that perspective, I know that you guys have already the plastic cards. So I'm just wondering, do you guys have any plans for metal cards in the future or something like that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, kind sir. Thank you for framing it so politely without when. Yes, we obviously do have plans for metal. Yes, but I heard that the devs love that you send in the support. If you send them the message when metal, for every message that's sent, the time for shipping this, it decreases. I think it's like even, it's not even the linear proportion, so make sure to send more messages like that. But no, it's coming. So it is indeed that. We will have the metal card, so if you guys are from EEA region, so unfortunately we're not available yet in Serbia, and that's the sad part about the regulations in the real world. But if you are from the EEA region, yes, you can go ahead and order the card now. And the beauty of this is, again, that's the fiat world that's controlled straight from your non-custodial wallet. So whatever you use, MetaMask, whatever you trust, and that's another, I hope you guys get the point, is that we're just like another dApp, right? So we're not a wallet. There's no way for you to import your seed phrase. You cannot generate the seed phrase with us. You already use what you trust, the wallet, the hot one, the cold one, whatever access or whatever level of exposure you want to provide, it's exactly the same way. So think about this as a dApp that just allows you and gives you this little window and this little bridge to paint for things like offline as you do normally. And hopefully with this approach, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to change the narrative is that, well, crypto is bad, right? Only bad people interact with crypto, or the way banks see you, because that's a risk. For them, they do not understand the risk exposure, and it's expensive, and it's hard for them to estimate, well, are you the good guy or not? But if we come from this perspective of, well, on-chain is actually the worst way to try to, launder money or do bad things. It's actually very complicated to do that. But that's actually something that can help you or can help us to clear that out and to make things very easy. Sorry, that was a very long answer to when metal soon. Yeah.
Thank you for speech, Anton. My name is Vasily. When you asked who is getting salary in crypto, I answer yes. And I'm doing that for a reason. I was excited to listen how your application and your solution is improving user experience and doing less friction for the user. And my question is a little bit connected to previous question, because I just tried to scan your QR code, went to your website, get this link, download your application, click it, and Google app say this item is not available in your country. So the question is how much your app is permissionless and how much you're improving user experience and doing less friction for user.
I think you touched based on an important part is what I said. There's very different things about permissionless and decentralized, and it's very few protocols on chain that can claim that they are truly permissionless and decentralized. There's nothing permissionless and decentralized when it comes to traditional banking. It's just none. And the moment you try and say, you know what, we're just going to create our new bank that doesn't follow the traditional rules, you get shut down. And why? Because, well, one thing is protecting the status quo, and two is, nobody wants you to do that. So what we are doing is we're saying is that, look, we don't have resources and we don't have money, as an industry, not just us, to fight the traditional finance. And it's very hard for you to shift or change the rules like how we want and how we like. So what we are doing is we're saying is that, look, you still have to play by these rules today. The only non-custodial fiat that's out there is cash in your pocket, and it's still bound to that central bank that issue that money, if it's worth anything or not, right? But what we are saying is that, look, if you are okay to play in real and live with reality, that your landlord will only accept wire. It will not accept your Pepe tokens. That's just the reality of it. You can try to fight that, or you can try to make it a very convenient and easy way for you to use that assets that you have and to use that DeFi primitives that are built there to exit into the traditional world. And in exactly the same way, you can say, well, what about Apple Store? What about Google Store? Are they permissionless or are they not? They're totally not, and they police everything that you can see. And they can police and tell you, do you have licenses to issue this app on our store? And you have to be, you have to accept those rules. And in this case, what we're saying is that, look, there's nothing permissionless when it comes to fiat. And it's impossible to create permissionless fiat system or even integrate permissionlessly crypto. So it's to the same point as you mentioned. Can we shift this? The question there was, can we shift this policing to the earlier stage so that the user can always control their funds and decide if they want to use them or not, but it's not the way around. When you have money in your bank account, you have the contract with the bank. So if the bank doesn't like something, the bank will tell you, we're not allowing you to use your money. But in this case, it has to be the other way around. You have to say, I allow you to use my money to help me do what I want. So it's shifting the narratives, and it's just shifting the points of failure as to how far you can push to be permissionless or decentralized, and how far not. Thank you, guys. I think my time is up. Yes, so thank you very much for that.
Awesome, Anton.
Thank you.